morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us, everybody. My name is Dwayne Henderson, and I'm a member of Cree Lighting's training and education team and host of our e-learning series. For those watching live, happy Wednesday. Real quickly about the sessions, once we get started, the presentation will be roughly 15 minutes in duration. The presenters will stay in the line for Q&A at the end. Although the attendees are muted, we do encourage you all to use the chat and Q&A box to ask questions throughout the session. We'll answer them at the end of the session, but we do encourage you to type those in as those questions are in your mind. So please type those in throughout the session itself. Wednesday is our industry-related content day, and today is part two of the session we began last week on TM30. And for that, I'd like to welcome back Eric Haugaard. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Dwayne. Thank you.
Hey, quickly, before we get started, can you talk about your current role in the business?
Sure. Currently, I'm working in specification sales. And before that, lots of other things.
All right. And I think on your first slide, you're going to talk a little bit about what we did last week. That content's available on YouTube, and then where you're taking us this week.
Yep. And so last week, we kind of did sort of the under the hood part of understanding TM30, kind of the math and science behind it. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about the reporting structure and then how we take that data and apply it to the application space with some things that aren't exactly recommended practices yet, but that's kind of the intent. We good to go, Dwayne? Hello?
Yep, sorry.
Oh,
we're good to go.
All right, thank you. All right, everyone. So I'm going to back up a couple of slides into the last presentation. Just start out with this quote that mentions that red and green at the expense of spectral yellow is preferred. We have this infatuation with saturated red or red color fidelity, and that's something that's been well known. If you look at these two color vector graphics, you'll notice that with that in mind, here we have an example of a light source that seems to be saturated in the red, saturated in the green, desaturated in the yellow. You would think that this would be much more preferred over this source. However, if we take a look at the metrics, they're both exactly the same CCT. The R sub Fs are almost identical, and the R sub Gs are identical. So the message here, of course, was that with just those color metrics as R sub F and R sub G, you would have no real reference to where the sources were different. So that's important. I'm going to go through a couple of slides from a Penn State experiment. So this is the reference slide we'll use as far as the colors that have a very, very high fidelity. So they're very, very close to the reference light source. This is a tunable LED system that allows us to kind of move through the gamut of possibilities with the color tuning system. So if we look at the first one here and take a look at the color vector graphic, we'll notice that it saturates very high in red. If I just use for reference the Coca-Cola bottle and the Orange Crush bottle, even the orange, you'll notice that they're saturated more in kind of that orange and yellow, orange and red area. If I take a look at the next one, this is very, very desaturated in red. So the red becomes very, very muted. And if you take a look, the next one here, I'm saturated in red, kind of desaturated in yellow, so that the yellow is actually kind of hue shifting a little bit to the orange. You'll notice a little bit more orange hue here than you have here. And then something very, very desaturated and very, very highly saturated. Notice that the yellow is kind of shifting away from any kind of orange component it has. It's getting very, very yellow along with the lemon. And you'll notice also the orange is kind of shifting more toward the yellow. So the question is, which one has the highest fidelity or R sub F? And the answer, if you saw some of the metrics there, they're all exactly 65 CRI. So the experiment here was to sort of move people through a metric that had kind of a lower R sub F, lower CRI it would be also, and just showing different levels of saturation. And move on to the reports now. So there are actually 3 levels of reports. There's a simple report, an intermediate report, a full report. Simple report contains the R sub F, which is just the average similarity to all colors. In this case, it's 82. The R sub G, which is kind of the average saturation value. So it's roughly what it means here is that the area contained inside this reference illuminant versus the test illuminant are the same. However, you can see where one is saturated or desaturated versus the reference. Then we have, of course, just the chromaticity and this thing called DUV, which is just really the proximity of the source with the black body. In this case, it's very, very close to being right on. The next thing we'll talk about is another term called local color fidelity. What this simply means is we've got 16 different hue bins, so we're just looking at one. All 16 are represented there. I'm just going to use one for example. So if I had my reference and tested illuminant exactly the same, you would have a coincidence of those 2 dots basically. Anything beyond that, either a chroma shift or a hue shift, would take you off of a value of 100. So you'd have 100 for perfect coincidence, something different than that. Just for a reference here, I've got, this is what the tomato would look like, kind of equals to the reference illuminant. if I move this direction, I would go highly saturated, more vivid, desaturated, more dull, and here I'd be changing from hue, so going from something in the red to more orange or more pink. The intermediate report has a couple of more pieces of information. The first one is the local chroma shift. This is just basically for any one of the 16 hue bins, how desaturated or saturated it is. And by example, if I just use hue bin 1, you see this little vector here that's really the vector component of chroma. That basically is translated here as in percentage. The next thing we have here is the local hue shift. This is kind of a change in sort of the location of color. If you look really carefully here, you'll see that there's a small little vector component for this angular shift. And that is represented here as 0.03. 0.03 is the value in radians. So for you math people out there, we all know that 2 pi radians is 360 degrees. So if you multiply 0.03 times 2 pi, you would get a translation of degrees. The full report actually has a few other pieces of information. The first one is it has the spectral power distributions of both the test and the reference source. The next thing is it has actually the fidelity of all 16 hue bins. So if I use this hue bin 1, for example, now it's that exact vector from the test versus the reference. So that displacement translates to a value of 83, or we're subtracting basically 17 points from that. Then, of course, we also have all 99 of the hue bins here. Remember, the hue bins, the color samples, the color samples we use for CRI would be 8. Here we have 99. So similar to CRI, if you add all 8 values up, divide by 8. In this case, we would add all 99 values up and divide by 99. And that's how we get our reference, our R sub F, our fidelity reference. You can also add all 16 of these hue bin values up, these local fidelity values, and divide by 16 and still get very, very close to that number. So I want to talk about some recommended specification criteria. I will emphasize again, it's not a recommended practice. This is something inside of TM30 that they're thinking about translating into recommended practice. And certainly we're all familiar with this fidelity number here. There's a couple of new terms here, vividness and preference. I'm going to go into definition of those in a minute here, but the idea here is to take a look at a given application and determine what is most important. And just because it's most important doesn't mean you have to fit the criteria that we're going to go through here as a level 1. It just means you have to really decide what's the most important type of performance for the application, and then the other ones would kind of fall beyond that. So a couple of interesting definitions here. Color preference, if you go out and read about this inside of TM30 in the addendums, there's probably about 1,000 words that actually describe this. But essentially, it's the pleasantness, the naturalness, acceptability, the related qualities to what people think is just a preferred light source in a given application. Typically, it has some overlap with color fidelity because color fidelity, the reference illuminants that we use to define color fidelity are sources that typically people like. They don't dislike them. The next one is color fidelity. We know all about that. That's very simple, just the average similarity to all colors, test versus reference. And then color vividness is really about the vibrancy, or we would call it saturation. So if you go with highly saturated colors to make things look more vibrant, it typically works directly against fidelity. So having fidelity and vividness being kind of your number 1 priority is not practical. So think about this as kind of a good, better, best scenario. Also think about more lenient and more stringent. And of course, there's going to be probably some cost implications here because higher color quality does not come for free. And again, I'll just emphasize, you sort of have to pick what's most important. So if fidelity is most important, it just needs to be more important than the other 2 references here. It doesn't mean it has to rank number 1. You could maybe have a good fidelity, and maybe your vividness and preference don't even fall on the scale. So here's the metrics we're using. We're using R sub F and R sub G. This can actually come off the simple report. And then after that, we're using R sub F. So this is the red fidelity accuracy for hue bin 1. Remember, this is that red stuff popping up again. We had this through tests and studies and reference examples. Red is a really important color within the spectrum. And then we have the red chroma shift. That is the desaturation or saturation, so positive or negative. Within the design intents for fidelity, we just use R sub F. And then in 2 of the 3 cases, we use the accuracy in hue bin 1. Vividness, we use R sub G. Of course, that is the actual average saturation. And then also the chroma shift hue bin 1, which is a saturation of red. And then for preference, we actually use 3 of the 4 references. So Just for comparison purposes, what would fall in a good category for preference with the metrics that you're seeing there? Turns out that through a survey of products, 95% of products that had a CRI of 80 plus fit that category. To get to the better, some of those same products fell in that category. Certainly some hybrid LEDs, but basically anything that was 88 plus higher in RCBS and CRI. Then to get best, you have to get in some more complex spots and things like that. Some color tunable systems certainly make it. And of course, there's an expense to go from left to right. Just to give you kind of a reference of where we've been in the industry, you know, a 70 plus CRI fluorescent is not a great light source. And it turns out if you look at preference, vividness, and fidelity, it doesn't even make it on the scale of good. In 835, your 80 plus CRI, 3500 Kelvin, probably the most popular light source for most office and retail settings, and it's a, you know, typically you're on electronic sources, so not a lot of flicker and things like that. A very good light source for fluorescent choice. That hits a preference of 3, but it doesn't even hit the vividness or the fidelity. And then once we get to some higher end, kind of warmer chromaticity fluorescence, you can actually get into a preference of 2 and a fidelity of 2, but again, it doesn't hit the vividness. So where might you rank these? So for preference, typically the discussion is around retail, office, hospitality, residential. For fidelity, manufacturing, medical, color matching, color reproduction, you can imagine how critical it is to be able to take a test sample and match it to a piece of printed material and get accurate results. And then for vividness, so the entertainment, display, and specialty retail. So here's a couple application examples I'm going to go through. So if the lighting designer was interviewing the retailer about what the intent of this application is, obviously it's point of purchase merchandising. And the retailer might say, you know, I like colors that really pop. I want that candy to look, I don't need it to look lifelike. I need it to look almost cartoonish, because they're going to consume this product, take it with them, probably never look at it again after they purchase it and just consume it. So I'd probably put vividness number 1. Keep in mind that vividness works directly against fidelity, so fidelity is not likely to be 2, but I probably still want the environment to look pleasing. I want the people's skin tones and things like that to look reasonable, so preference would probably be 2, and fidelity would probably be 3. This is maybe sort of a contrary application where I've got these really super high-end Oriental and Persian rugs here. I certainly would probably put fidelity first. I don't want my customer to buy this article that they fall in love with the way it looks in the store, and take it home and roll it out in their living room and realize it's something different that they really purchased. So maybe preference goes second on that one also, and certainly we rank vividness third, again, because it works directly against fidelity. So something like a multi-use facility like this, a hall that can be rented and decorated for a variety of different purposes, when this is being shown to the possible occupants, I'm guessing that the lighting designer would say, you know, we want the preference to be first, because we want this to look overall pleasing to the people within the space. We want to be able to market this. But also as it's decorated, we want to make sure that the garments people are wearing that they picked out and the decorations, the flowers also look familiar, and they don't look different than what the intent was. And of course, that would put vividness last. So that's the end of it. I know that was very fast. I hope to get a lot of good questions from the audience, and I'll kick it back to you, Dwayne.
Thanks, Eric. A couple of questions here. One is about, can we get a copy of the presentation? Those will be are being made available on what we call Cree links. So somebody in the sales channel you can reach out to, those certainly can be made available. And then there was a question about last week's, the Understanding TM30, the part 1 is available on our YouTube channel. So you can reach out to that channel for that. And session 2 will also, within the next 24 to 48 hours, will also reside on our YouTube channel. So you can find that there. I have a question because it is a lot of information, and I think try to simplify it, and maybe they just wanted to use RCBS, so the fidelity metric, because I've been using CRI, the one metric we have. Is that going to lead to better results?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting discussion point, Dwayne. So one of the things that's happening right now, I'm not sure at what stage it's in, but the people that actually control CRI, which is the CIE international group, I know it's in draft form. I'm not sure it's adopted yet, but RCBS with the 99 color palettes will become, or is likely to become, the new CRI. So you'll have basically the CRI will be RSBF. Turns out that if you're using broad spectrum color sources, so not real spiky stuff, the CRI and the RSBF kind of match up pretty close within a few points, certainly. If you use really super spiky sources like some fluorescent sources and certainly HID, that's not always the case. So, but the point is you have a better, more accurate representation when you have 99 colors versus 8. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Dwayne, but some of the questions we get is, what if I just know the CRI and I know R9? Well, the R9, as we talked about in the last presentation, it's kind of the red color fidelity, how close it matches to things like an incandescent source that contains a lot of red. That's likely to be around for a while. I don't think that people are going to kick CRI plus R9 to the curb. But of course, the RSBF is likely to be the new CRI.
So that's kind of another question that just popped in is when is CRI being retired and TM30 being industry adopted? And is that, you mentioned kind of recommended practices, is that kind of what will lead to that, you think, or?
I think so, but I don't know a lot about the political side of the CIE, but there's, representation from each country typically is available. And I believe that most of the stuff they have to move forward, it has to be based on consensus, not majority. But I'm not positive on that. But, we've had CRI around for 50 years. It's been relatively unchanged for 40, and they've been working at changing it for the last 25. So it's a reference that things don't happen too quick within the CIE.
Yeah, and I think part of that could be the industry too, right? So it could be manufacturers pushing TM30 data into the field and out to the industry with the expectation that it's got some value to be consumed. And then from the design standpoint, right, if designers are demanding that and we see more specifications around that, I think that will pull the information from manufacturers into the marketplace. I think the industry will kind of drive some of that based on our own behaviors.
Yeah, I believe it's going to be habit forming. I don't think that there's going to be all designers using this data differently. There are a lot of lighting designers and people that specify lighting are going to be really begging for some guidance based on specific applications and then references to successful stories that actually are the outcomes at the application level where things were specified using TM30 data.
So there's a question about TM30 information on fixtures and light sources, specifically to an internal tool called Cree, but we have it on some products. You want to talk about how that information might get dispersed in the field?
Sure. Yeah, I think for products where you're really boasting about your color quality for the given application, if you have the space to actually include that data directly with the report, I would suggest it'd probably be the full report. But that's going to be a good marketing decision to do that. If a supplier does not show that, they should be able to provide it to you somehow through a request, but at the minimum level, they should be able to provide you with the spectral power distribution data that can be input to a TM30 calculator, and you can provide it on your own. Anybody that's a member of the IS can have the TM30 calculator free, and it's relatively simple to load data in and get the outcome. So I'm not sure, Dwayne, if that's the answer you're looking for, or if you need some more clarity.
Yeah, I think that if we've done it, and kind of a lead into next Wednesday session is going to be on understanding an LM79 report, but an LM79 report essentially contains all the data that we would need to generate information for TM30. So the testing process, at least that we're doing, I'm assuming it's true of others, is creating the data that is required to give you the information you want.
Yeah, so I believe, the way we do LM79 is we do spectral radiometry. So we have spectral data along with the intensity and angle, but you don't have to have spectral data. When you do a photometric report, you can say, I just want intensity at angle, so that the intensity distribution at angle, and I'm not going to worry about doing an integrating sphere test or doing spectral radiometry on the gonio photometer. But that's not how we do it. When we have spectral data for everything we test photometrically.
And the group will learn more about that next week, because that's some of the terms we'll be throwing out next Wednesday in that session as well. All right, I don't see any other questions, Eric. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll kind of close up shop for the day then.
Yeah, sounds good. And anybody that's in listening here, if they want to email me or email me their phone number. I'd be happy to call and have discussions with anybody that wants a little bit more deeper dive in this. This is a difficult topic, and it's probably best served in about an hour and a half to 2 hour session. So doing it in 15 minutes is not easy.
Yeah, I think you learn a little bit more each time. You get a little bit more comfortable, but you're right, it's tough to kind of absorb all at once. So thanks, Eric. We appreciate your time. I want to thank the audience again for joining us. And as we look to Friday, we've talked a little bit in the sessions about APIs, application program interfaces. So we're going to actually tackle that as part of the topic of under the hood of software and APIs. And then looking forward to next week, Monday's design session will be around parking lots. And as I mentioned, next Wednesday, we'll actually be diving into the LM79 reports. We'll give you some information around that as well. Again, any feedback you have, please feel free to reach out to me, share whatever feedback in terms of the sessions and how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. And then as Eric mentioned, any questions that you need to reach out to him directly, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you guys might have regarding the content. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and have a great day, everybody. Take care.